You are listening to the Billy Dees podcast.
We are waiting just a minute for everyone to engage the live stream. Remember, you can find the Billy Dees podcast on your favorite platform.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the live stream. As always, I am absolutely thrilled that you are here. If you have never checked us out before, we are primarily an interview and a commentary podcast. I'm going to go through all that and tell you a little bit about the intro here in just a moment. We wait maybe a minute or so for everyone to lock on to the live stream, and then we begin the podcast. So give me just a moment. All right, we're about a minute 26 in, so I will go ahead and begin the podcast. Thank you. All right, well, hello everyone, and welcome to the program. My name is Billy Dees, and as always, I am absolutely thrilled that you are here. If you've never checked out our podcast before, we are primarily an interview and a commentary-based podcast. Thursday nights, we go live. We go live on X and live on Facebook. And of course, those are really just cool things to do. What really matters is the podcast itself. You can find the Billy Dees podcast on all the major podcast platforms. We are on all of them. That is the vast majority of where our listens come from. We now have close to a 10-year history. The Billy Dees podcast in its current form has been around 10 years, and I've been around a lot longer than that, as you can probably tell. Especially if you're watching the video, right? Or you've seen pictures of me. Yeah, I'm one of those people that's of a certain age, The podcast today, commentary, of course. I have it titled, Fairytales Can Come True If You're Not Woke at Heart. Now, that's a little joke, obviously. But we're going to get into what happened with Disney. And I'm going to try to get beyond the either defending Snow White or running it into the ground. There's a lot to be learned here. There's a lot to be learned in terms of marketing and just society in general, how you present things. You know, so often we hear when we have an argument or something like that, it wasn't what you said. It was how you said it. And how they said it in terms of setting up this movie was pretty bad. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to touch on some other things, including the texting controversy, I guess I'll call it, and a few other things. But getting into this this Disney thing, unless you've been living under a rock, you know that Snow White debuted within the last week or so. And it's been really panned. It's been panned largely by audiences. It's been panned by critics, although some critics have had some good things to say about it. And it represented a monumental investment in terms of what Disney put into that movie, and they're not going to get it back. Or at least I'll be very surprised. And we're going to talk about that. Okay. The movie starred Rachel Ziegler and Gal Gadot, and both of them have gotten criticism. Actually, a lot of people said Rachel's performance, and I'm not much for musicals, so you know I'm not. Yeah, I really don't have a dog in this fight. But from what I understand, a lot of people said that Rachel did a pretty good job in terms of her performance. Of course, some people didn't like it because they decided they didn't like her, which is another thing. We don't do that here. Gal Gadot, heavily criticized for her performance in this movie. Now, from what I understand, she was paid a lot more money, bigger star. And there's been rumors about these two stars having bad vibes with each other because of their political leanings. And in this day and age, I don't doubt that that's true. Apparently, Rachel has said some pro-Palestinian things. Gal Gadot, obviously, Israeli. So, yeah, that's in this day and age, that's quite the pairing. But let's talk a little bit about the old Snow White. Let's talk about that a little bit. Now, here again, I am not a Disney person. Across the board, I have never been a Disney fan. Even when I was little, I did not give a damn about Mickey Mouse and all that other crap. I also have been critical of this company about how they treat somebody mentioning or using the likeness of one of their characters in the most casual way. They're always up in arms about it. So there's what they're doing with a lot of the news organizations the Disney company is buying and how they're packaging things to the public. These are all things that I do not like about the Disney company. So, but even when I was young, like I said, I never cared about Mickey Mouse. Was not at the top of my list. And I wasn't much of a cartoon person, and I'm still not. But anyway, getting back into why the original story worked. Let's talk a little bit about the original. Way back in 1937. Oh, very evidently so. We're going to play that infamous clip from Rachel here in just a moment. In 1937, Walt Disney pretty much mortgaged everything he had and the kitchen sink to get Snow White made. And a lot of people have gotten into, well, the original story was kind of this and that, and you just like they have with Willy Wonka. All right, fine. But the point is the Willy Wonka we remember is the 1971, 1972 version. And we remember Snow White for how the movie was made and how the movie was presented in 1937. Snow White, what you have to kind of understand about that story is, yes, she was pure. Yes, she was innocent. But her sincerity was the inspiration for everybody around her. She was not a superhero. She was not wearing tights. She was not kicking anybody in the nuts. She wasn't doing all these things that superheroes are supposed to do today. But she was an inspiration because of her sincerity. She made everybody around her better. That's the thing. You aspired to want to be with her. You aspired to want to be like her. And it wasn't about her becoming this all-powerful superhero and realizing that she didn't need a man. That's a narrative, quite frankly, and I'm going to probably say this more than once during this commentary. If you want to write that kind of a story, then write something original. All right. Here's the thing. Disney, for the most part, I worked in consumer electronics for a number of years, and dealing with the public, that's a story in and of it by itself. But it came to, it was very obvious that people wanted entertainment centers, home theater systems, TVs, and all that to be babysitters for their children. And Disney movies were a great way to do that. Okay, you're busy cooking Thanksgiving dinner and you don't want to be dealing with the kids. Put on The Lion King or some other thing and let it play. And the kids would be occupied for a while. And it was pretty safe to do that. All right. And getting back to the original Snow White, the investment that Walt put into that movie was enormous. Now, I don't know how accurate these figures are. My guess is they're pretty close. But if you could put the 1937 investment adjusted for inflation, okay, the money that Walt Disney invested into that movie, today, that amount of money would be around $4 billion. That's what that movie made for the investment. So that would be like a movie today, just making an extraordinary amount of money, making $4 billion. That would have been like Titanic 4 times over. For the amount of money that he invested into that movie, he got back $4 billion in sales. Now, I don't know how long that was. You got to keep in mind, in 1937, the movies ran for longer than a week before they went to streaming. So that movie might have been in the theaters for a long time. And I don't know if that figure encompasses the video sales, the videotapes over the years, the VHSs, and all these other things. So Walt Disney mortgaged everything he had on that movie, made back $4 billion. And I have no doubt that was a large foundation of what the Disney company was to become. That investment really paid off. By contrast, the movie that opened this past week made $50 million on its opening weekend. Roughly $50 million. I've heard 47, I've heard 53 domestically here in the United States. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about what they invested in that movie, but it was a lot. Okay. Probably around $500 million. Okay. So you have 200, and they're kind of hiding these figures, but let's presume the movie cost $250 million to make. And typically, these very large movies double that amount for marketing. So if you spend $250 million to make the movie, you're probably going to spend $250 to market the movie. Okay, so a roughly $500 million investment on the opening weekend. Now, you're not going to make everything back the first weekend, but $50 million for a movie of that stature, of that investment, is really, really low. Getting back to these wholesome stories like Snow White and even The Lion King and some of these other things, these were movies that you could put on as a parent and not to have too many concerns about what was happening. But somewhere along the line, the babysitter decided that they can raise the children better than the parents. That is what happened. And you don't know what's going to show up on screen now in terms of your beliefs or whatever. And here again, I know everybody says, well, your beliefs don't matter. If you're marketing to a certain audience, if you're marketing to the audience of parents, and that's because obviously you small kids can't go out and buy movies and TVs and all these things on their own. So you're marketing to parents that are providing these materials to their children. You want to make sure that these things are what they always have been. Snow White, Mickey Mouse, just fun little quirky stories. And that's where it's at. Obviously, The Lion King had some serious tones in it. I am familiar with that one. Very good, very good. And these are all ideals that you feel comfortable presenting to a child. And now what the Disney company has done, both in their investments, the other companies that they own, and in the material that they are presenting, what we have is a golden shower of wokeness. And, you can call wokeness anything. I've had liberals tell me, well, what does woke mean? That's a word that conservatives use. That was the word you were using a couple of years ago. Now you're up to social justice warrior. And then a couple of years from now, I'm going to say something that the social justice warrior said, and everybody's going to say, well, what does that even mean? Because the word becomes ugly because it is a twisted type of value set that is presented on this high plane of morality and ethics. And it really undermines what a fairy tale is supposed to be. Fairy tales are just that. They are fairy tales. They are fantasies. And this is about escapism. If you are going to a movie, if you are going, professional sports the same way. People go to football games on Sunday afternoon, especially fathers and sons, go to these football games and they cheer for their favorite team and they forget about what's going on at the office. They forget about what's going on at home with who takes the garbage out and all the mundane things that you have to go through in life. They watch people, run up and down the field and get tackled and get hit and they cheer. It's escapism. That's what you're selling if you're in any of these businesses. And when you interject a lesson into a fairy tale, the fairy tale crumbles. Okay. I'm going to play a couple clips here This is the notorious weird interview of Rachel Ziegler. So let's start there.
The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
Super weird.
So we didn't do that this time.
Weird. You know, this is a movie, like I just mentioned, that pretty much made and saved the Disney company. You're talking about a monumental return, whatever length of time it was from 1937 that they made on that original investment. You know, adjusted for inflation, $4 billion. And all of a sudden, what was a big part anyway of setting the foundation of that company has become something ugly. It has become weird. It has become the story of a stalker. It has become all of these things. And you got to keep in mind that parents that are bringing their children or plan to bring their children to see this movie grew up on the first one, and possibly their parents did. There's something made in 1937. You're talking 3 or 4 generations here. This is a story that people remember fondly. This was the type of story people watched before they went to bed. You know, back in the good old days, as they say, when life was so much simpler. You watched a little fairy tale, and you went to bed, and your mom gave you some warm milk and a cookie, and you went to sleep. Those were the good old days. Those were different times than they are now. Everybody's got a cell phone, and everybody's watching all the crap that everybody's saying. Now, obviously, this movie had a bad opening, and this was Rachel Ziegler's, one of them, anyway, one of her responses. Let's take a look at that and look at the contrast between the first one and the second one.
And to everyone who hates when I win, the winged victory came to the Louvre in pieces, and people still line up to see her. And I can only hope that despite my flaws, and despite my cracks and my breaks, and there are many of them, that at every premiere and everything I do, people will wait in line to see.
Okay, that's quite the contrast in demeanor, in mood. And I said this last week about Rosie O'Donnell. I'm going to say it about Rachel Ziegler. I don't find her mood and her composure in that video satisfying at all. I don't like to have broken people. Okay, and that is a person who has been under a lot of pressure and has been under a lot of criticism. And quite frankly, some of it is very mean-spirited. Some of the things that have been aimed at her about the way she enunciates her words and all this other kind of stuff has just been downright mean. Some of the memes have been downright mean. But she hasn't helped it any. For whatever that was worth, or how her spirit was during that clip, she is comparing herself to a work of art that that people are still going to line up to see. She cannot concede that she played some sort of a role in this. And this is very important. I am not, if I was, one of the people that were in charge at Disney, I would not be pointing my finger necessarily at Rachel Ziegler. The problem is the Disney company. This is part of their, like I said, their wokeism. This is part of their agenda in a lot of the things that they are doing now, not only in the content of the movies, but the companies they own, whether it be ABC and all these other things. The news, the way the news is presented. These are all things that, quite frankly, is embedded into the DNA of the Disney company. And the other thing that I would give some slack to Rachel Ziegler on is that she is very young. There is no doubt that she has no background in marketing or public relations. Absolutely no doubt at all. And which here again comes back to the Disney company. I would question the wisdom of having a young star carry a big budget movie like that, and then also turn around and have her do the marketing. Here again, the marketing budget is as big as the budget for the movie. So that's a lot to put in one person's hands. All right. And then I would also blame her generation. She comes across as entitled. Here again, she's comparing herself to a work of art at the Louvre. And this is an entitled age group. This is an entitled society that we live in. Everyone deserves to be worshipped. Everyone's opinion deserves to be respected. Everyone's this or that is the right way. We have learned from the lessons of the past. And we know better now at 22, 23 years old than people who have been around a long time. We know a lot better than they do. And I touched on this in my last podcast. No matter how smart an individual is, and I would say music, which she is very talented in, I won't take that away from her. That's my opinion. I've heard her sing. She's very talented. Music and math are two talents that always come early. Okay, people do not get all of a sudden gifted with math or all of a sudden gifted with music at 40 years old. If you are extraordinarily gifted in those two things, they always come early. All right, and she has the talent. I'll give her that. But she is entitled. And it's not just the entitlement of a movie star. It's the entitlement of a generation. Everybody has to be worshipped. Everybody needs the red carpet rolled out in front of them. That's just the way they are. So here again, getting back to the Disney company, is this the best way to promote the movie? Probably not. Disney, like I said, has issues. The modern writers are very much in love with the idea of retelling old stories in a new way. Just like the love story is ugly. It's a guy who stalks the woman that he loves. It's so we gotta change this. Well, why not just create new fairy tales? And, you know, some people have made the issue about her ethnicity and Snow White, whose skin was white as snow or whatever the line is. Like I said, I'm not a Disney person. I don't necessarily have an issue with that so much as some of the other aspects of this story. But here again, why not? You know, civilization is what, 10,000 years old? We have a big world with all kinds of different cultures. Why not, if you're going to tell a fairy tale about a person of color, why not tell a story from another culture? I would be very interested in that. I would be very interested in a fairy tale that comes from a completely different culture than Western culture. I would be totally interested in that. I would find that fascinating and its impact on modern society. I would be very interested in that. Why not go that route? Why take a very successful asset of your company and spin it around into something else? Either write a new story or find another one or leave the classics alone. All right. Fairy tales are meant to be fairy tales. And here again, do the Disney writers forget this? The people who are behind these stories. You know, this is one of the patterns I've noticed in these women superhero movies now is the story arc is always the same. You have a woman who she's trying to do her best, but she doesn't do her best until she finds the strength that she has inside her. And of course, this is a strength that she had all along. She just didn't realize it. She just didn't tap into it. Kind of like the story arc of The Wizard of Oz. Okay. You had the power all along. You just didn't use it. You didn't use your womanhood. You don't need a man. You had the power all along. This is a story that has been told enough times in these types of movies. And this story arc, we can't blame this all on Rachel Ziegler. The story arc itself is old. And it's, for me, this applies to all the superhero movies too. There's always a superhero who comes along, and then there's a super villain who somehow has the same powers that he does, and there's this big conflict. How many times have we seen that movie? Okay, I have no interest in watching another one. And there's a lot of these coming of age movies for women now. The story arc is the same. It's the same every single time. Now let's talk about the Seven Dwarfs, because this I find really, really strange. Okay. Apparently, the current wisdom is that one person of one ethnicity cannot portray another character of another ethnicity without there being some sort of a problem with political correctness, with cultural appropriation. And I understand where this comes from. Some of the caricatures that were created about people in the past, certainly during the 1930s, 1940s, were very unpleasant. So I understand there's this knee-jerk reaction. I don't necessarily believe as an artist, if you're an actor and you want to create a character, a fictional character in particular, that is another race, another ethnicity, and you're doing it from the standpoint of your interpretation of this character, and you want to create a certain humanity that has an effect on the audience. I don't think that's quite the same, but if we're not supposed to go there, then that's fine. Okay, I'm okay with that. All right, so we don't want to do caricatures. Well, the talk was originally that we were going to have 7 full-size people, and then that changed. And then the idea came up about hiring little people, and that was dismissed. And what they ended up doing, and I've seen the clips of the movies of Snow White, is quite literally, not figuratively, what they did with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Since they dismissed the idea of having full-size people, and since they dismissed the idea of hiring little people that are actors, what they did is they quite literally created cartoon caricatures of dwarfs. They did exactly the worst thing that you could possibly do. To me, it would have been much more interesting. This would have made a key difference in the movie as far as I'm concerned. To portray, have 7 little people actors, however you want to describe them now, whatever the politically correct term is, have 7 little people who are actors, living, breathing human beings, who create 7 characters that have a distinct human personality, have a vibrance, have a life force that many people in the audience, including the adults, have never seen. One of the rare exceptions would be Peter Dinklage in the Game of Thrones. He was portrayed as a person, not necessarily a little person. It was referred to a lot in the series, but he was a person. And you could have had 7 working actors, and there's not a lot of parts for little people, but you could have had 7 parts and really expanded those parts and gave them all little storylines and little things that humanized them. That would have been wonderful. And instead they turned around and do the worst thing possible. And the caricatures that they're supposedly so afraid of, they quite literally, in cartoon form, made human-like cartoon caricatures of the 7 dwarfs. I'll leave that where it is. So anyway, where does this leave Disney? I don't know. I don't, the company's not going to go away. It's just not yet anyway. It's just way too powerful. It's one of the most powerful media companies in the world. So it's not going to go away. It's going to absorb this loss as large as it's going to be. And the financial loss is one thing, but what it's going to do to their brand is another thing entirely. What are they going to do to follow this up? What disaster are they going to follow this up with? When are they going to learn that people come to Disney branded movies that are made for children? They want escapism. They want a fairy tale, not a lesson. They don't want to sit in a classroom, in a woke classroom, and be lectured. And quite poorly, quite frankly, the way they handled the dwarfs. So I just, there's the monetary loss that Disney's undertaking, and then there's the damage to the brand. What are people going to say about the next one that comes out? What are they going to try? What goofball thing are they going to try with the next one? And this comes as a critical time because Hollywood is losing its audience. You know, I forget the exact figure. The number one movie a couple of weeks ago made like $10 million. That's low. That's really low. And we can blame COVID for that. There was a breath of life there for a while when the new Top Gun, when Maverick came out. Tom Cruise, with his star power and the jets and everything, he got people back into the audiences after COVID. And there's been a couple of hit movies, the Barbie and some others, but there hasn't been the consistency that Hollywood once had. And I believe I've said this before, the actors who are becoming politicians and advocates, with some cause they want to champion, and this is the case with Gal Gadot and Rachel Ziegler both. They take on these political causes. And here again, you alienate people with that. Hollywood in general over-invested in streaming. I think they wanted to not make the same mistake the music industry did in the early days of streaming. One of the mistakes that the music industry made was they fought digital formats in favor of physical media, and they didn't embrace the technology soon enough. So they didn't want to make the same mistake, and they went too far the other direction. They over-invested in streaming. And with that, on the heels of COVID, movies now run in the theater, and 2 or 3 weeks later, whatever, in a very short period of time, they're on the streaming services. People do not have the reverence for the movie theater that they once did. This idea that you're going to sit in a dark room 2 or 3 hours with a bunch of strangers and enjoy a movie, that is not as enjoyable as it once was. And a lot of that is because of phones and TikTok and all of these other things, Snapchat. If you are of a certain age, and I've said this before, if you are a small person, young person, you're probably much more likely to know who Logan Paul is or one of these types of individuals than you are Denzel Washington or Brad Pitt or any of those people. The reverence for acting, the respect that it once had is simply not there. A lot of the magic that they talked about in Hollywood is now in the palm of your hand. These are all things that are adding up to really spell an uncertain future for Hollywood in general. And Hollywood movies aren't even made in Hollywood, in California anymore. There's so much regulations. I've heard things where it's actually cheaper to hire a bunch of extras in a foreign country. Go to a foreign country, take all that equipment, take your crew, take the stars, everything else, put them up in whatever you need to put them up with, all these hotels, than it is to film in the back lot over in California because of all the regulations and all the stuff, and then not even getting into the unions and all that other stuff. So it's an uncertain future for Hollywood, and I really think that it's time. If I was in charge of a studio right now, well, let's give the people some entertainment. Now, let's give them some escapism. Let's give them a fairy tale. Okay, let's not worry about the lessons. I'm going to talk a little bit about this chat. And here again, unless you're living under a rock, the Signal app is a coded way of texting and communicating on mobile devices. And a Signal group chat conveyed details of the timing and weapons descriptions of a planned attack against the Houthis in Yemen. And this chat included the names or initials of Trump officials. And the editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg, who published his account of the messages. Now, the mystery to me, anyway, is how Jeffrey Goldberg got into this chat. Apparently, Jeffrey Goldberg got an invitation to get into the Signal and then get into the chat. So it seems like, by my estimation, I'm unclear how that happened by accident. I can understand accidentally texting the wrong person because I have done it, and we all have done it. How many of us have had a chat with our significant other, and we say "I love you," and we look at the phone again, and it's our boss. That wasn't meant for you, right? So I understand how that, but this seems like it was a multi-step process to bring this person into Signal, then to bring this person into the chat. It seemed like a multi-step process. So I'm a little unclear on how that happened. And of course, a lot of people are. There's all these hearings and everything now. And the user was identified, the person who created the chat, as Michael Waltz. And this turned out to be the National Security Advisor, Michael Waltz, a top advisor to the president. Pete Hegseth was involved in this. J.D. Vance, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, TG, who was reportedly Tulsi Gabbard, Steve Witkoff, MAR, which turned out to be Marco Rubio. So there's a lot of very powerful people in this chat discussing an attack on a foreign country, on foreign country soil. And I was really disappointed in Pete Hegseth, because he was getting off, it looked like he was getting off a plane, and he was being interviewed by the press, and he got this attitude. And he went off about how terrible this publication is. They were behind the Russia hoax and da 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 da. Okay, and that's not a no. And his demeanor really reminded me of a frat boy who has been accused of having a keg at the house. That's how he handled himself. And here again, I know if you're new to the show, I'm not necessarily pro-Trump. I'm not necessarily against Trump. I'm for the truth. Okay, and I was not impressed with Pete Hegseth one bit through this whole thing. J.D. Vance, as far as I know, has been relatively quiet about it. I did notice a statement from Marco Rubio who said it was, sensitive material, although they won't call it top secret. And here is an excellent point. It depends on what team you're on. Okay, if sensitive information gets put on a civilian email server, it's the end of the world. Okay, but if you're talking about dropping missiles on a foreign country in a chat that gets exposed, well, it's not really top secret. And it's the other way around. When the other side does it, the emails with Hillary were no big deal if you're a Democrat. And this chat is the end of the world right now for the Democrats. And I personally, it's glaring to me. Now, why other people can't see these games that go on is totally beyond me. An objective observation of this is going to be as follows. Typically, these security breaches, whether they be emails or whether they be texts, and regardless of what side they are on and what theatrics come with them, typically these things are not prosecuted. Typically, these things just go away. It happened with a number of things with Hillary and other people, and it's going to happen here. This is, getting back to storytelling. I'm going to quote the great Shakespeare. Full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. That is what this text thing is going to be. I personally believe, from what I understand at this time, this was at the very least careless. I think it should be a lesson learned. And if these people involved in this would just come forward and say, hey, man, this was just stupid, I'd have a lot more respect for them. We've learned our lesson, but no, it's not that. We play games with terminology, and the left is notorious for that. This is right out of the playbook of the left. Top secret and sensitive really aren't the same thing. Yes, there was information in there about attacks as they were happening in real time, but that isn't really top secret because the exact location. This is playing games. This is playing games. I don't care what side does it. It's playing games. And we should be getting better. And a lot of times if people just come out ahead of things and say, hey, this was This was a dumb thing to do. Okay, yeah, it was a dumb thing to do. We shouldn't have done it and move on, but they don't. They play the games, and which just feeds the press, and then just feeds the bases. And all the bases hate each other that much more, and they make excuses for their side and condemn the other side. Is basically how this works. Okay, I am going to leave you with the quote of the day. The quote of the day. And this is all in line with the theme of this, which has been bad public relations. The wrong way to handle the press. The most inane, goofball, incompetent ways you can handle yourself. This is the closing quote of the day. It comes from Jasmine Crockett, who said, and I quote, now in comparison with Shakespeare, "So we in these hot ass streets with the Hot Wheels governor who a hot mess, who a hot ass mess." I don't even know if I said that correctly because it's obviously much more difficult than anything Shakespeare ever wrote. Yeah, let's check this out, shall we?
Because we in these hot ass Texas streets, honey. Y'all know we got Governor Hot Wheels down there. Come on now. And the only thing hot about him is that he is a hot ass mess, honey. So yes.
Governor Hot Wheels, a tree. He had an accident with a large tree falling on him when he was 26 years old, and it paralyzed him from the waist down. His loving wife has stayed by his side. He has an adopted daughter, and that is why he's in a wheelchair, and that is why he was referred to as Hot Wheels. Quote of the day. Yes, that's a masterpiece. Hey, I'm Billy Dees, and you can find the Billy Dees podcast anywhere podcasts are found. So if you're watching the live feed, know that you can go to any podcast platform. We are on them all, and simply search the Billy Dees podcast. It will come right up. 10-year history, lots of episodes to check out. Feel free to listen to a few before you make a judgment. I always tell people, listen to a couple. You know, some nights I'm better than others. And we have a mix of things. We don't just do shows like this. We have interviews. We have lighthearted stuff. We have really deep stuff when it comes to people who have been through some sort of a trauma recovery. And we have lots of those kind of podcasts, lots of episodes available. It is absolutely free to subscribe. And if you follow us on social media, we don't sell subscriptions to extra content either. I know that's a thing. We don't do that to our listeners. We appreciate our listeners. Our listeners are the reason that we are here. We appreciate you. And you can follow me on X, which at one time in the past was Twitter. Real easy to find, at Billy Dees. And also now we have the Billy Dees Podcasts Facebook page, which here again, if you're really into the podcast, there's some behind the scenes stuff, some other things that we're following and doing on there. So yeah, great. But otherwise, the main show on the major podcast platforms, do check it out, the Billy Dees Podcast. I am absolutely thrilled that you listened to our program today, and we will talk to you again very, very soon.
Thank you for listening to the Billy Dees Podcast. Follow Billy Dees on X, at Billy Dees, for updates about the program.
Do you listen to music or audiobooks on streaming devices such as Sonos or Amazon speakers? How about on your car sound system? If you use Spotify, Audible, or Amazon Music on any of these systems, you can also listen to the Billy Dees Podcast the same way. Billy and his team go the extra mile to make sure our podcasts sound as good or better than anything on the radio. Listening to the Billy Dees Podcast has never been easier. You literally just have to ask.